Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Mentor Nation podcast. It is your host, John Abbas here. And if you are watching this live, then this will be the last episode you hear of 2021. As I record this, it is December 29th. And I'm just excited. I'm excited to close out a fantastic year, to begin another year. And I just want to thank you for being here, whether it is your first time here or whether you've been here before. I just want you all to know that your support means so much. And all that I ask is, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button just so you get a notification every time a new episode releases. And I have some really great episodes coming up that you absolutely do not want to miss. So with that being said, I'm excited to introduce you to today's guest. Shane Lynch is the president of a company called Stormguard. Stormguard is a construction company that specializes in exterior renovations like roofing, siding, gutters, and windows. But what's fascinating about his story is, through his leadership, the company has grown to over 35 franchise locations all over the country in just a few years. And that's what makes this interview particularly special. In today's interview, we talk about the things that it takes to grow a company that scales, especially through a franchise model. And here's why I love that. You know, it's one thing to have a great idea. It's a whole other thing to build a successful business out of a great idea. But man, it is on an entirely different level to build a successful business out of a great idea and then create systems so that other people can run your model anywhere, regardless of background, and have success. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Shane shares his story, the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur, and more specifically, why he believes that the franchise is a very powerful way to scale a business and create massive growth and success. This is a great interview. If you've ever had an idea, or you're wondering, like, how can I take my little solopreneurship or my business and scale it all over, and what it's like and how to start a franchise, this is the interview for you. So sit back, take some notes, and help me welcome Shane Lynch. All right, we're recording. Shane, welcome to the podcast, brother. Great to have you on. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really, really excited to be here.
Yeah, I can't wait to dive into your story and just, you know, some of the lessons that you've learned building a pretty big company. And for all you listeners out there, Shane is the president of Stormguard, which is a construction company specializing in exterior work like roofing, siding, gutters, windows. But the exciting thing is through Shane's leadership, the company has grown. And just correct me if I'm wrong, Shane, but you know, you've grown to over 35 locations around the country. Is that correct?
We're at 35 open today. And then we've got 2 more that we've sold that will be training. Our training is kind of based on weather, you know, we'll be training probably early next year, just once the weather from the winter clears up.
That's awesome. I mean, that's powerful. You know, you've grown a company to 35 franchise locations all over the country, no signs of slowing down. And so for where I thought we could create a lot of value for the listeners is just, you know, starting with your story. I think the story is obviously most important when we get into the journey and the wisdom, but really just helping the world understand something that you're great at, which is scaling a business, especially through a franchise model. And I think you're the perfect person to teach everyone today. But I'd love to start by just having you share a little bit about your story, background, and kind of like what led you to doing what you do now.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a lawyer, once a lawyer, always a lawyer. You know, when I graduated law school, it was in 2008, and the economy was not great. It was not easy to get into a firm. So I actually worked for free for a while as a law clerk for a federal bankruptcy judge. And I ended up working in the court for 2 years for a judge here in Fort Worth. And we actually had some really, really cool cases. We had, you probably heard of a baseball team called the Texas Rangers. So they went through bankruptcy, I believe it was in 2010.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was in our court. And they actually went to the World Series while they were in bankruptcy. Almost won it. They were one strikeout away from winning, actually one pitch away from winning the World Series. But that was like a year-long case that we did in about 3 months. And we had Nolan Ryan and Mark Cuban in the courtroom. We had an auction that ended at like 3 o'clock in the morning. It was a lot of fun. But the most important thing about that experience is that I had a great mentor. His name was Dennis Michael Lynn, Judge Lynn. Unfortunately, he passed away earlier this year, but he taught me, because law school teaches you a lot of things, but it doesn't actually teach you how to be a lawyer. It teaches you how to think like a lawyer, but it doesn't teach you like what the practice is like.
Right.
He taught me the practice, and most importantly, he taught me how to write, which is a very critical skill for lawyers. After I finished that, I went into private practice for a couple of years. I represented high net worth individuals and companies in Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And towards the end of my practice, I started doing appeals. And I just, can you imagine having a job where you walk in every day and you know that you're going to get in a fight? Like, that's your day. You know, and it's probably going to be a fight about something really stupid, where the other side, you know, is smart and they are intentionally misunderstanding what you're saying because they have to zealously advocate for their clients. Sometimes you're like, dude, you took this position that I'm taking right now 6 months ago. How do you not understand the position? Oh, right. Because it is not convenient for your case to understand it today. So I wanted to. I didn't want to do that anymore. I got sick of fighting. And, you know, I was in the fortunate position where I talked to my dad, and he was thinking about, him and his partner were thinking about buying a company, and that company was Stormguard. And he said, well, you know, if you don't want to do that, why don't you come run this? So, you know, I said, yeah, I'm done with law. I'm gonna do that. So in January of 2015, I left the practice of law and joined Stormguard as president. And we had actually, my dad and his partner had bought Stormguard in, I think, June of 14. And when we bought it, I think it was 4 franchisees right around there. Yep. But half of those we actually had to take out. Like, they shouldn't have been sold in the first place. They were not performing. And so basically, we stepped into a company that had 2 franchisees that were operating. And probably at that point, neither one of them was profitable. And then, you know, and we certainly were not profitable. We moved it to, you know, over the last, 6 years, almost 7, we've moved it to the point where we've got 35 operating. And I'm happy to say, you know, the vast majority of those, you've always got your underperformers. You've always got your 1 or 2, really your bottom 10%. So 3 to 4 that are not doing well or not doing what you want them to. So the vast majority of them are profitable, and we are profitable, which is a great place to be. I remember when we started, we always do monthly financial meetings, and I remember when our financial meetings moved from how much money did we lose this month to we made money, and those meetings got way easier when you're making money.
Oh my God. I think tech startups need to take some notes on some of these business practices. I can't believe like what they lose. And actually, what you've said so far brings me to a couple of questions that I just had before we actually go down the rabbit hole of franchising. You said you represented a lot of high net worth individuals in Chapter 11. Mm-hmm. Like, what did you learn from that? Like, were there a couple lessons that you learned from seeing these businesses go to Chapter 11 that helped you when you started your businesses? Like, was there like a common mistake, or was it just scaling too fast? Like, what did you see when you were in that world?
So, you know, at the time that I was in private practice, bankruptcy is pretty cyclical. You'll see different types of companies go in at the same time. Mm-hmm. So when oil is really low, you'll see a bunch of oil and gas companies go into bankruptcy. Right. When interest rates pop up, which could happen any day now, I have no idea. You'll see real estate companies go into bankruptcy. And so that stuff you can't really control for. You build your business around some assumptions that you can't control. You build your business around the assumption that oil is going to be $60 a barrel. You build your business around the assumption that interest rates are going to be 3.25%, and that sort of thing. And so a lot of the businesses that we took through when I was practicing were real estate companies that just got hammered by adjustable rate mortgages that really, really hurt them when the adjustments came.
Got it.
They got hurt by, there's something in, you're a real estate investor, so you know this, the debt service coverage ratio.
Yeah.
They got hurt by DSCR covenant defaults, which are technical defaults, but the banks decided, hey, the property is worth a fair bit, we're going to foreclose. And so there were strategic bankruptcies to avoid foreclosure and that sort of thing. But we did have a couple of operating companies that went in. And I think the key to avoid a bankruptcy, if those base assumptions are okay,
yeah,
you can't control are okay, is that, yeah, you make money with revenue, but you really make money by controlling your expenses. And that's was the problem with the operating companies. They would just start spending too much money, and part of bankruptcy is helping them build a budget, build a multi-year plan, that sort of thing. And it's looking at the expenses and going, do you need this? What is this adding to your business? I know it's maybe there's 2 or 3 different CRMs that you can choose from, and one of them has like all of the bells and whistles, but it's 3 times the price. Okay, well, do you need the bells and whistles, or do you just need a CRM that gets the job done? Eventually you might be in a place where you can afford the bells and whistles, but you really have to be careful with how you spend and what you commit yourself to, because you're not going to sign a CRM contract that's, hey, you can break it on 30 days notice. It's going to be for 2 years, and you better be sure that that's something that you want to commit yourself to, or you end up in kind of a world of financial trouble.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. My second question was, your dad wanted to buy a business franchise. Obviously, you had to get rid of a couple of the franchisees. What attracted him to the business? Was it the numbers? Was it the potential? Like, why Stormguard?
So my family and my dad's partner, we own a bunch of different businesses. My dad's background is in real estate. We do real estate development. Outside of Stormguard, we build and own and manage apartments and single family subdivisions and that sort of thing. And so, Stormguard, with its construction kind of leaning, was a natural fit for him. But in addition, he saw an opportunity that when you need to go buy something for your house today, where do you go? You go to Home Depot,
yep.
You go to Lowe's, right? Well, with a lot of home services, that option's not there. It's, I got to find a roofer, or I got to find a plumber. Who am I going to use? Maybe I know somebody that's had it done recently, so I'm going to ask them, and hopefully it's a trustworthy company and that sort of thing. And so, we saw the opportunity to create a national brand in a space where there was no national brand, to create a trusted brand where there's very little trust, and to hopefully grow that brand into something successful and beneficial, not just for us, but ultimately for our customers. Being from Texas, every year I see on the news after a hailstorm about some, storm chaser that came to town and they took some money and they just disappeared. They never did back.
Yep.
And so, it's great that we can make money, but I think when you're looking at what sort of business should you buy, or what sort of business should you invest in, you really have to put yourself in the consumer's mindset of, what is going to be beneficial to them. And in this case, I think it was clear to us that there is benefit to the consumer in having a trusted brand that, at the time we were thinking, hopefully we could take national. And so that's how we got into it.
That's awesome. Yeah. Speaking of that, I think you guys have a location right down the road from my house. I live in Franklin, Tennessee. So
yeah. So we do, and the funny thing about that location, we have franchisees from all walks of life. The owner of that location was actually a CEO of a restaurant company. But I just talked about, asking your friends, who do they use? His number one referral source is Nextdoor. It's asking his customers when they're on Nextdoor and they see someone that says, hey, do you have a roofer? Asking his customers to recommend them. That's his number one referral source.
That's crazy. So let's start at the beginning. You take over as president of Stormguard. You have a business that's really not profitable. Like, I think you hinted at it earlier. Obviously, you make real money by managing expenses. Was that the first, like, what were the first things that you did when you took over this company?
So when we bought the company, one of the keys to franchising, there are a lot of them, is franchise development, selling more units. You can manage, there's two keys to making money: revenue and managing expenses. So you can manage your expenses all day long, but if you don't have the revenue, which in franchising revenue is derived from royalties, then you don't have anything to manage.
That's right.
So we knew that we needed to sell more franchises. And when we bought the company, we actually inherited a franchise development contract. So franchise development is franchise sales. So there was a company doing franchise sales for us. And so basically we said, hey, what do we need to do to sell more franchises? And they did a great job for us when they were in place. And so step one was just sell as many franchises as possible. And we made some mistakes there. Now that I look back on it, when you sell a franchise, you want to be selective, but you don't want to be too selective. You have to remember what I said earlier. You've always got your bottom 10%. You're always going to have the people fail.
Right.
So at the time, we said yes to everybody. Me being a bankruptcy lawyer, my dad and his partner being who they are, we don't like people failing. Nobody does, but we take it very personally. And so, we financially helped some of those people when they were closing to make sure that they were, going to land safely. And that cost us some money. So, we were probably under selected then. And then we went through a period where we were probably over selected. We were looking for, this person has to have a 100% chance of success. And so we had a rule, actually still have the rule, that there's three people that kind of make the decision. If any of us say no, then we don't approve them. And for a while, we probably said no to too many people, hoping to avoid the failures. And now that I look back, I wish that at the beginning we said a little more, and in the middle we said yes a little more.
Gotcha. Now, and I've always wondered this, like, obviously you guys bought into a franchise model, but if you had got involved in Stormguard before that, when it was just a single business, like, would you have still went the franchise route, or would you have went maybe a more corporate model? Like, I don't really fully understand why one person picks one over the other. Is it because you want less control? And I'd love to have you elaborate.
Yeah, so I love franchising. I think that there are certain times when franchising makes sense and certain times when it doesn't. So franchising lets you scale very, very quickly. A great example of that, we've done a good job. We're at 35, 2 to add, 37 in 6 years. But a really great example of scaling quickly is Crumble Cookies. Have you ever been there?
Absolutely.
Okay. So Crumble is, I think, roughly the same age as us. And I remember the first time I had Crumble was probably 2 years ago or something. And there was like one in Fort Worth. And just out of curiosity, I was on Google Maps a couple of days ago, and I was like, I wonder where all the Crumbles are. There's probably 20 Crumble cookies in the DFW Metroplex now. And in every major city in Texas and a bunch of minor cities, where I'm like, really, is there a population to support it? But franchising lets you scale because of really two things. First, you don't have to find management. Anybody that has a multi-location business knows that one of the most challenging aspects, and this is true of every business, is finding the right people. But when you're about multi-location, it's finding the right people that are going to run it the right way when you're not there. Well, with franchising, you have somebody that has their money and they are fully invested. Like, a lot of people, this is a big chunk of their life savings that they put into it. So they are invested in making sure that business is a success. So that's one of the two reasons. And then the other reason, it lets you scale using other people's money. Which
that's a good reason. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's that. Yeah. I mean, those are the two reasons that you would want to franchise. When you're talking about whether franchising makes sense for you or not, the kind of negatives are that I have a lot of control. Right. I have the ability to tell my franchisees that they have to buy from certain suppliers. And I have the ability to tell my franchisees that they have to use certain logos, and I can approve all of their ads and all of that stuff. But if a franchisee employee makes a racist Facebook post, this happened, I can't tell my franchisee that they have to fire that employee. I can suggest it. I can strongly suggest it. Luckily, I have very good relationships with my franchisees. So, that was a simple phone call of, dude, did you see this post? And the franchisee, what? You're kidding me. All right, I'm going to talk to him right now. Right. And so that resolved itself nicely, but I can't control the micro within the business. And if you want to control the micro, you're not going to be able to do that through franchising.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So going back to because I have several questions here, because I think a lot of people struggle with scale, like whether it's good people, good systems, how do you scale values and integrity? And I can't wait to cover a couple of these things, but I want to go back to like when are you ready to franchise? Like, how do you know that you're ready? Is it when you have bulletproof systems down for everything top to bottom, or is it when you're making a certain dollar amount? Like what's kind of your checklist from, okay, you're ready to go and start franchising or thinking about it?
I think it's both of those things that you mentioned, and then one additional thing, brand. So have you built a brand that has some value to consumers? If your goal is you're going to start a business today and you're immediately going to start franchising, that's probably not going to be successful. You need to build some sort of value for consumers. We did that by having an original location that was started in 2003. The very first Stormguard was. So have you built a brand? Even if it's just local, you don't have to be nationally known, but you have to have some proof that people want what you're selling. Two, systems. You don't have to have every system under the sun figured out. One of the things that we're probably rolling out, we'll be rolling it out. It's early enough in November, so we'll be rolling it out this month. Is a learning management system to kind of like an online Stormguard University. Do you have to have that in place when you start franchising? Absolutely not. In fact, if you're a single location, you probably shouldn't, because that's a whole bunch of money that you probably shouldn't be spending that early in the game. Do you need to have basic things about whatever your business is? What's your customer acquisition process? What are your kind of standard billing and not just billing, but how do you charge? How do you figure out what your prices are? You need to have a CRM that you're comfortable with, because your CRM is ultimately going to be what all of your franchisees use. You're going to mandate that in your franchise disclosure document in your contract. You have to have the basic systems in place, those things. And then you need to figure out what positions are the must-haves in the business, because you're going to ultimately have to teach your new franchisees who do you need to hire, what are their jobs, those sorts of things. And then the last one that you mentioned, money. You're going to need some revenue, because franchising is not easy and it is very expensive. Ultimately, your job as franchisor is both to sell franchises, yes, but then to support your franchisees so that they can be profitable and successful, because you make your money from a royalty. And for me, my royalty is a percentage of the gross sales of the franchise. So technically, my franchisees could sell, $1 million and never make anything, and I would still make my money. But if that happens, they will go out of business and I will lose that revenue stream. So, I have to be able to get them to be profitable. And that is a very expensive endeavor. You're going to have training people. You're going to have to provide travel to get, your trainers out to the locations. If you have a brick and mortar store, you're going to have, a land, somebody in land and development to help with site selection and to work with the architects and the general contractors to get it built or to get, the finish out completed on the rented space and all of that stuff. So there's a lot of money that you're going to spend on support that you just need to plan on. I personally think, because I know what it cost us, you should plan on spending $1 million before you actually make anything on your franchise.
Wow. That's good. It's good to have that realistic expectation. I do have a question. Like, do you have to employ like R&D people? Like, for instance, what somebody would charge for a square on a roof in Dallas could be very different than what they would charge in like Kentucky or one of the other markets. Like, how do you figure that out when you bring on a franchisee? Like, do you have someone to go and explore that market, do comparative analysis? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. So technically, you can't force your franchisees to charge a specific price. If you look at an advertisement, drive by McDonald's and they'll have a big ad in the window and it'll say like $1 for a hamburger. And then there'll be a little asterisk. If you get out of your car and you walk up to the asterisk and you at the bottom, it'll say something like suggested retail price, price may vary, something like that.
Yep.
So technically the franchisees, they can set their own prices. Even if you look at franchises where pricing is super consistent, like McDonald's, you will notice that if you go to high density markets, which are expensive, a New York or something, they might have special pricing for New York and Chicago and Boston and those types of markets, just because the standard pricing doesn't work with the labor and rent costs that you've got in those cities. So, my business is a little bit different because we actually don't set the pricing with what we do a lot of insurance restoration. So the insurance companies set the pricing, but you are going to figure out as a franchisor, if you're selling, let's use Crumble as an example, a cookie, you are going to figure out, all right, well, in general, COGS is X. I want my margin to be Y. So suggested retail price should be Z.
Gotcha. I have just one more question on the franchising part. What's the hardest part of franchising? Like what is giving you more grief than anything else, whether it's satisfying or not, but like what has been just like the pull your hair out? Like,
so most challenging part of franchising, I think a lot of franchisors, I know a lot of other franchisors, and we've talked about this, and I think most of them agree, is that you can know the answer. We've done this more than 35 times. Unfortunately, we've lost franchisees.
Yep.
So we know the answer to the question. When it comes, one perfect example is how to compensate salespeople. Everybody does it a little bit differently, but we know that the answer falls into X percent of revenue. And then you get a franchisee who's brand new and they're like, I don't want to do that. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to go off the wall. And we're just like, we've seen that tried. Didn't work. They're going to do it anyway because it's their business and they get to make their own mistakes, even though, 3 people tried it and you tried that, but it's my business and I want to do it. So the most challenging part is knowing what the answer is And I think it's probably similar to having kids.
Yeah. Yep.
Watching them burn themselves. Sometimes you just have to make the mistake to learn the lesson.
Gotcha. And I'm sorry, I did have one more question on franchising.
Yeah.
It was, how do you scale values? Like, you could scale systems. You obviously, it helps that obviously an owner has their own money involved, but like, how big are you and maybe other franchises on like establishing like core values and like constantly driving them home? Like, is that a big part of franchising? Is it only with certain industries? I've always kind of just wondered that. It's, corporate's different, but with franchising, like, how do you do that? How do you implement that?
So I think that's a great question. And I can't answer for other brands, but I know what we do. And we've been very, very good at it. So there's a magazine, or I guess it's technically a website. I do think they do a magazine once or twice a year, though, called Franchise Business Review. And basically what they do is they call franchisees from different companies and they ask the franchisees to grade their franchisor on a bunch of different things. One of the things that they ask them to grade them on is values. We won an award from Franchise Business Review this year for our values. Over 90% of our franchisees ranked us as the highest possible answer on things like integrity, honesty, and trust. And
Wow.
So how do you do that? I think it is one of those lead from the front things. We make it from the very first time that I meet a potential franchisee. I make it clear what my values are. And my values are things like integrity. We are going, if in our business, insurance tells us what needs to be done, and then they pay us for it. And unfortunately, in this business, a lot of contractors, they'll get a statement of loss from an insurance company that will pay for A, B, C, and D, and they'll take a look at B and they'll go, it looks fine. We're just going to reuse it. And my position is, if we're being paid for it, we're going to do it.
Yep.
That's the right thing to do. My position is, if we make a mistake, then we're going to fix it. And we're going to make sure that the homeowner never suffers from our mistakes. And I take that so far as, if we lose a franchisee and the franchisee did some work on a home, I'm still going to honor the warranty that our franchisee wrote. And it has cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars fixing mistakes from franchisees that maybe didn't do things the right way. So how do you scale values? By being an example and living what your values are. If you do that and you talk about your values and you make it clear from the beginning what your values are, then it's obvious, and your franchisees are going to want to try and do those same things because they bought into your system and they saw your success and they want to do whatever is going to make them successful. And that means a big part of it are those intangibles, following the values.
I love that. That's actually really, really awesome. So what's next for you and your company? Is it to go the way of Subway and open up I'm just kidding, but you have 35, 2 more coming online, has the goal from day one to build a certain size of a company? Like, what's kind of like your long-term goal? I mean, you're only 6 years old and you're crushing it and you're expanding quickly. What's like the 10, 15, 20-year plan?
So I don't know the number, but I know what I want. And what I want is, when a homeowner has a hailstorm or a windstorm, or they decide, roof's old, starting to leak, got to do something about it, that the first thing they think of is, I should call Stormguard. That's my goal. I want mind share. I want people to think of my company when they think that they need to have something done on the exterior of their home, and specifically roofing. That's our big focus today. We technically do everything on the exterior of a home: roofing, windows, siding, gutters, emergency tarping. we focused, almost exclusively on roofing. We do the other stuff when it's part of a hail claim, or not a hail claim, a roof claim. So goal one, mind share on the roofing. Once we have that, I really want to explore expanding, and growing the business in those other product categories. I mean, windows by itself, there is an entire franchise system that all they do are windows. So, whatever we do in sales today and roofing, we could easily match that in windows when we decide that we want to put our attention there.
Wow. That's really awesome. So my final question is to the listener who's listening to this episode, and they have a business currently, maybe it's doing pretty well, and maybe they would love to franchise it one day in the future. What advice would you give them today? Like, what should they think about? What should they focus on? What should they consider before even going down that route? Like, is there any advice that you would give someone that wants to scale, but it's not there yet?
Yeah. So I think when you're thinking, I want to franchise someday, you need to ask yourself, and I know that founders, they're, I'm the magical person, I made this happen, right? But you need to step back and you need to go, okay, if I pulled myself out of the business and I had time to train somebody to, do this and to run the business, could I put somebody else in my place? Or am I really the magic? Can no one else do this? Because if the answer is I'm the magic, no one else can replace me ever, you are not franchisable, right? But if you step back and you say, you know what, given 6 months or 12 months, I could, because when I sell a franchise and I train somebody, I don't even consider them like past the crawling stage until they're about 18 months old, 18 to 24 months. So, if I had 18 months to teach somebody how to do this, could they maybe not run the scale that I've already built, but could they run a smaller version of it and grow? If the answer is yes, then your concept is probably franchisable. And so that's the question you have to ask yourself.
I love that. My wife and I, one of the things that we love is buying businesses, existing businesses that are poorly ran, and then just turning them around and making them profitable. And there's one that we have right now. And that's why I'm asking you a lot of these questions. Is we have this med spa that's just fantastic. We bought it, has the best reputation in all of Nashville. It's because we have a world-class esthetician that's there, and it was just ran poorly by the doctor that owned it. And so, we've taken over and now we're building this brand around it. We've renamed it, and we've like everything from furniture to signage. It's just like, it's a really cool process. And so, I put myself in the shoes of the listener right now, because I'm just like, we'd love to franchise this one day because there's so much demand for aesthetics. I didn't realize it. But just how to go from one to many, and like what is important. And this has just been really, really, really helpful, because I think so many people, they get trapped in a box, and I see it every day. They can't work on their business because they're so busy working in their business. And so to chat with somebody who, and I don't know if you've ever read the E-Myth, but book changed my life. It was just like how to get out of that rat race and start thinking about like, how can I scale and build this? And so just everything you said is just super spot on. So I just want to ask, for the listeners that were really inspired by this interview, they want to connect with you, say hi, or just follow, Stormguard's journey, your journey. Is there a place to do that online, social media? And if so, where would they go?
Yeah, absolutely. So the website is stormguardrc.com, stormguardrc.com. And then if you get on Facebook, every single one of our locations has their own Facebook page. And then we have a corporate Facebook page as well. So we post a lot of content to the corporate page about, our number one salesperson last month. One salesperson across the system sold $500,000. So we post that sort of stuff there. We post, where we're looking for franchisees. We post when our franchisees win local awards, that sort of thing there. So just search Facebook for Stormguard. You can find both our local corporate page. And then I love helping people. I am happy to talk to any of your listeners.
Awesome.
Email me at any time. My email address is slynch, SLYNCH at stormguardrc.com.
Awesome.
Call me and I'm happy to give advice.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate that. That means an absolute lot. I can't wait to publish this episode, and I'll put all of that in the show notes. Shane, man, this was a great interview, just full of just applicable wisdom. And I just want to thank you for your time, man. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It has been an absolute pleasure. And I really hope that one or two of the very expensive lessons that I will help people avoid making some mistakes.
Absolutely. We can only hope, right?
Exactly.